Welcome everyone to the Thursday edition of our Packers News Camp Chat. Oh, our Thursday edition. I almost Friday edition. It's Thursday in the Packers practice world. It's their second practice of the week. The Friday edition of our Packers News live chat. Alongside Tom Silverstein, I'm Olivia Reiner. The Packers hit the field for their most intense practice of the week, gearing up for their Monday night football game against the Atlanta Falcons. We'll bring you the latest on wide receiver Allen Lazard's injury. Plus, we'll hit on some of the other updates to the Packers offensive contributors in just a moment. However, as always, Facebook, Periscope, and YouTube friends, now is not the time to be quiet. Leave us a question down in the chat. Tom and I will get to some of your thoughts toward the end of our conversation today. Tom, last week, wide receiver Allen Lazard was a saving grace for the Packers offense. Against the Saints, he had 146 yards and a touchdown with wide receiver Davante Adams out with a hamstring injury. This week, Lazard is reportedly out indefinitely with a core injury. How concerned are the Packers with Allen Lazard out and Adams still practicing in a limited capacity about the depth of their wide receiving core?
Yeah. Well, there's nothing reportedly about him being out because he's going to be out for a while. He's got this core muscle injury that required surgery, and it's generally a 4 to 6 week injury. But, in my research, I found that skill players take a little bit longer to come back. Greg Jennings had it in 2012, and it took him about 9 weeks to come back. Robert Tonyan had it last year and played through it and was never really the same, which is kind of why I think they decided to just go ahead and do the surgery because it's so early in the season. They'll get Lazard back. It's just a matter of when is it going to be. It's at least going to be 4 games, and then we'll see after that. The Packers are not saying what the timetable is for him to be out.
On the good news on the injury front, Packers wide receiver Davante Adams practiced for the second consecutive day in a limited capacity. The Packers have other wide receivers on the 53-man roster, including Marquez Valdes-Scantling, Malik Taylor, and Darius Shepard. Who is most likely to get a newfound opportunity with Lazard out?
Well, Shepard probably is number one on that list. I think he's going to see the ball more, but I think Tyler Ervin's going to see the ball a lot more. He's been used a lot as a decoy, a lot of the jet motion, and they really don't give him the ball all that much. I think we might see him start to be a bigger part of the offense. Valdes-Scantling is, if Davante Adams doesn't play, he's their number one receiver, and he'll receive the most attention. But Shepard, Malik Taylor may get some time, and I don't know. Maybe they'll bring up Reggie Begelton from the practice squad for a game, try to get him some action too. If they don't have Adams, it's going to be a rough go without Lazard. But that's how football is right now. There's lots of injuries, lots of guys out. You got to deal with it.
Speaking of injuries, it wasn't just Davante Adams returning to practice yesterday and today. Tight end Josiah DeGuara also returned to practice today. He's been dealing with an undisclosed ankle injury that kept him out of the Lions game and the Saints game. How likely is it that DeGuara will be healthy enough come Monday?
I would say it's 50-50. I think they were trying him out today to see how he reacted to practicing in pads. I think his ankle injury is such that, it might feel okay the day that he practices, but then it might not the next day. And we've seen him. He tried to practice last week. It didn't work. There's just must be not feeling quite right. And so I think it'll really depend on how he practiced on Friday.
Another one of the Packers' 2020 draft picks is having a hard time seeing the field. However, it's not due to injury. Running back A.J. Dillon is in a crowded room with Aaron Jones and Jamal Williams. Dillon has only had 12 snaps, and about half of those have come in garbage time against the Detroit Lions a couple weeks ago. How likely is it that Dillon gets to work into the offense a little bit more starting this upcoming week?
I don't think so. I think that as long as Jamal Williams is playing like he is, and they want to use Aaron Jones. I think Dylan's going to have to just accept being a third wheel until they get into later in the season and guys are either banged up or they get into a big lead against somebody and they want to run out the clock and use him. I don't think there's any rush. I'm not really sure why there's a rush. Everybody's rushing to get him on the field. They're doing pretty well right now with Aaron Jones and Jamal Williams, and there'll be plenty of time later in the season. Anytime they can get way ahead or are way behind, then they can get him some action. But they're doing pretty good without him.
Speaking of the Packers 2020 draft class, rookie quarterback Jordan Love missed practice today due to an undisclosed illness. We don't know exactly what that is. We don't know if it's COVID related or not. However, Tom, given the fact that Brown County has been seeing increasing rates of positivity of COVID-19, what precautions are the Packers taking with the virus?
Yeah, the NFL Players Association did a survey and ranked Green Bay as the worst, for COVID in the NFL, the worst market per, infections per positive tests per 100,000 people. So the Packers are in a really tough situation. I mean, unless you're in a bubble, there's no way to completely avoid it. You try to do everything that you can. You wear masks. You tell the players to really, really be careful. Don't do anything that might risk you testing positive or running into it. But it's going to happen. It's going to happen at some point. And that's not to say that Jordan Love has it. It's that time of year for colds and flu as well. And it could just be that he's sick. But the only way we'll know if it's COVID, he'll wind up on the COVID list. And then they're going to have to do all kinds of contact tracing. But let's wait before we take that step. It's just something to keep an eye on.
Let's flip it over to Facebook, Periscope, and YouTube for all of your lovely viewer questions. If you have not yet asked a question, it is not too late. Leave it down in the chat. Tom and I will start addressing some of those right now. Let's start with David. David asks, where is wide receiver Equanimeous St. Brown? Cut him. Let's start with the first part of your question. St. Brown has been on IR the last several weeks. Tom, at what point can Equanimeous St. Brown come back when he's healthy?
Good question. I totally forgot about Equanimeous St. Brown. What does that say? I believe he's eligible to come back. He was put on IR right after cut downs, wasn't he? So 3 weeks, I think he'd be eligible either this week or next week. So he must still be battling that injury. We see him working out on the side, but he's not practicing. So, he can't practice while he's on IR. They would have to activate him. I think right now they're just kind of checking to see how they're doing with Darius Shepard and some of the other guys, and then they'll make a decision. They may have to cut him and put him on practice squad.
Thank you, David, for your question. Another wide receiver related question, and we'll circle. We kind of started off with some Adams related news. However, we'll take Joshua's question here. He would like an update on wide receiver Davante Adams. Adams, as I mentioned earlier, returned to practice yesterday in a limited capacity. He practiced once again today. However, today's practice is a little bit different. It's their second practice of the week, and it's a padded practice. How significant is it that Davante Adams participated in the padded practice this week?
Well, it doesn't really mean anything because we don't get to see what happens once they go into the team drills. It's very possible that they're going to wait another week and let him have the bye. We don't know. I'm sure they're testing him. They're seeing how he's running. Is he feeling any tightness in it? Is he cutting the way they have seen him do it before when he was healthy? I would say it's not a guarantee that he's going to play. And just the fact that he's practicing, I think sometimes that can just be part of the rehab process, is get the guy out there and let him work and see where he's at. So when we get the injury report tomorrow, I think we'll know a little bit more.
We've got, related to the wide receivers group and the injuries they've been dealing with, our friend Jordan asks, Do the Packers tight ends carry the slack for the wide receivers group until further notice? Let's take a look at some of the stats from even the last game with just Davante Adams out. Against the Saints, Robert Tonyan had 50 yards and a touchdown. Jay Sternberger had 3 catches, 36 yards. We had Mercedes Lewis with a catch for 18 yards and a touchdown. Tom, how reliant are the Packers going to be on their tight ends until the wide receivers room gets a little bit more healthy and experienced?
Yeah, absolutely. I think that's a big, a definite thing for them. I think they've got more than enough tight ends to stretch the field with Tonyan and Sternberger. And if they get Deguara back, then they get a lot of options there. I totally agree that I think the tight ends will play a big role. Atlanta's starting safeties have not been participating in practice. We'll see what happens on Saturday. But if they can, get some tight ends running down the middle of the field, that would definitely help make up for Davante Adams.
I'll throw another fun question at you, Tom. We got this question, and Jim and I talked about it on yesterday's live stream. I'll pick your brain a little bit, see what you think. Southwest Florida Packers fan club wants to know, do the Packers bring back touchdown Jesus, wide receiver Jake Kummerow, who's currently on the practice squad with the Buffalo Bills?
No.
Ooh, why, Tom? Tell me why.
They made that assessment. If they wanted to keep him, they could have kept him. And they decided that the other guys that they had, Malik Taylor, Reggie Begelton, Darius Shepard, that they were better and had higher upsides. And I don't think they're in that position where they need to bring him back. I mean, is he gonna replace Davante Adams? I mean, more than Darius Shepard is? I don't think so. So no, I don't see it. If it happens, I think I would mock them, because you made your decision. You deemed the other guys more talented. You moved Darius Shepard up to the 53. Go with it.
No Kummerow potentially in the cards for the Packers. However, Stanford wants to know, with Lazard out, how likely is it the Packers would go after a veteran wide receiver? Tom, the Packers have added a couple of practice squad receivers with minimal NFL experience. How likely is it that they go out and look for someone with a little bit more NFL experience?
Yeah, if Davante Adams' injury was lingering or carried through the bye and they were worried about it and felt like they had to sit him some more or could only use him a little bit, then they might start to explore the trade market before the trade deadline. But I don't think there's really going to be anybody out there that is going to be that much better than what you have. It's possible. I haven't really looked at the wide receiver group, but I think that's one of those things where if one guy's out, you don't necessarily need to panic and go out and sign somebody. I think if you have 2 guys out, and one of them's Davante Adams, or he's not playing up to par because of the injury, then I think you might start thinking about doing something.
We'll switch it up and we'll start talking about running backs a little bit, going back to what we were discussing earlier about A.J. Dillon, his lack of snaps in the offense. David suggests that the Packers use A.J. Dillon and put running back Aaron Jones out in the slot. How likely is it that we start to see a couple more multiple back formations from head coach Matt LaFleur?
Well, we've seen a little bit of that. Typically, it's Tyler Urban gets in the backfield and then Aaron Jones gets in the slot. But I got to say, I'm not a big fan of that. I think Aaron Jones is too explosive as a running back, and he's so good that don't get too enamored. I wrote a column on this. Don't get too enamored with his pass catching skills. What he does best is break runs. And if you're going to do that just to get A.J. Dillon in, then I think you're making a mistake, because Aaron Jones is a 75-yard run waiting to happen. And, the fewer times you give him the ball, the worse the odds are that he's going to break one. So I I don't really like the logic in that. I'm not sold on it, I should say.
Thank you, David, for your suggestion here. Let's move over to Roland. Roland has a very passionate question for you, Tom. Roland asks, why did the Packers draft Jordan Love? He's a third-string quarterback when the Packers could have potentially used that first-round pick on a wide receiver.
That's going to be a question that we're going to be asking for maybe 2-3 years. I don't know. I don't think it's a question that we can answer right now. I think it probably it has to hurt him a little bit that Justin Jefferson went out and had like a 170-yard game for the Vikings in his third game in his NFL career. And, a couple of the inside linebackers, Patrick Queen is starting for Baltimore. I think I think it's open for debate, but until we know what Jordan Love is, I will say I've spent some time watching him. I just wanted to see if he'd been making some progress since training camp, and I did see a little bit of it. Granted, it was individual drills and they're just throwing on air to guys, but you can see he's got the arm skills and he throws a nice ball and he's got a quick release. We're just not going to know for another 2 years probably.
Patience is always a virtue. Thank you, Roland, for your question. We appreciate it. We'll move over to Badger in Canada. Hello, where in Canada are you? Well, always love to know where all of our lovely viewers are from. They ask, did the new NFL bye week rules get brought up during today's media availability at all? If I recall correctly, LaFleur spoke before the new bye week rules came out. However, just the gist on those rules is that during the bye week, which is next week for the Packers, they're going to have to stay in Green Bay and get tested every day, which is awfully different from a typical bye week. The Packers would usually get to go out and travel and come back later to Green Bay after the bye week. How does this impact their plans and just testing in general?
If I'm the Packers, I would want them out of Wisconsin. Go to somewhere where where it's not a hot spot. Sitting around in Green Bay is not going to be a great idea. They're going to have to be really disciplined. I mean, that whole week. It depends what LaFleur does. This sort of makes me feel like he's going to have them at the facility, not necessarily practicing, but maybe they're going to do some social stuff or team building on Wednesday and Thursday. He's got to give them the weekend off. I mean, they've got to have, I think it's even in the contract that they have to have the weekend off. But boy, they got to be nervous about it because, there's just, they all need to stay in their homes. It's not good up here.
I see a lot of video game tournaments in the future, a lot of Warzone being played. Yeah. I know that that's what they like to do on their off days anyway. However, they're going to have to figure out what the programming is going to look like for a long stretch of time. Thank you so much for your question, Badger in Canada, who's apparently up in Calgary. I've always wanted to go to Calgary. It's on my list of places to go, perhaps after the pandemic. That is going to do it for us today, everyone. Thank you so much for joining us. We'll be back tomorrow to wrap the week up and preview the game against the Atlanta Falcons on Monday. For Tom, I'm Olivia. We'll see you next time.